Hi again, and welcome to the sixth in my series of videos on the myths of landscape photography. And this one is a pet peeve of mine, and that is about the reliability of information and the extent to which video titles can raise false expectations. So anybody who's looked at YouTube trying to find information on how to do things will have come across videos with a defined number of steps to achieve a specific goal. And I've got a list of the sorts of things that you'll see. So you might see 7 steps, 5 steps, or even 3 steps. And those steps will be described as secrets, foolproof steps, essential steps, a formula. And what they will do is enable you to improve or even master. And as a result of that, you'll achieve awesome images, stunning images, even perfect images. Well, is life really like that? Can you really break down things like mastery of a skill to 7, 5 or 3 steps? Clearly not. It's nonsense. It's generally regarded that it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill, whether it be photography or anything else. And if you look at the lengths of time that apprenticeships run for, 4, 5, maybe 7 years to learn a skill, you can see that you can't break things down into those sorts of steps. So why do people do it? Well, the short answer is to build a following. There's a lot of people providing information or purporting to provide information on YouTube who are making a living, either directly from content provision or by driving traffic to some other commercial activity they're doing. And quite clearly, this technique of putting in a specific number of steps to achieving a very high level of competence is very attractive. We all like a shortcut. We all like an easy route if we can find one. Very often the information that's given isn't bad, it isn't necessarily wrong. The problem I have with it is the expectations that it sets are too high, and that can lead to disappointment. So really what I want to do in this video is just to talk a little bit about how you assess the reliability of information and how you go about identifying what will help you and what you need to go forward, and whether you should be using YouTube or whether you should be using some other source of information. Now it happens that I was thinking about doing this video for a little while, and Tony Northrup has just put up a video claiming you can't learn anything seriously from YouTube. Now, Tony justifies this by saying he's been a trainer for 25 years. Well, so have I, and I disagree with Tony. There are things you can learn from YouTube. To say that you can't learn things from YouTube is a nonsense. But it's not always the best way to learn information by watching a video, no matter how good it is. And there are other sources of information that it can pay you to use. So don't get hung up about 5 simple steps. Those steps might be useful, they might help you to improve, but they won't get you to perfection. You won't become Ansel Adams by following 7 steps to mastery. I doubt very much that Ansel Adams followed 7 steps to mastery. He spent hours and hours working and refining his craft. And basically, we're going to have to do the same thing if we want to aspire to anything even close to his level of ability. So don't take these things at face value. Take them with a pinch of salt. And particularly when it comes to issues of composition, you need to be very careful. There are rules of composition, and people argue over the semantics, whether they can be rules. And I've talked a little bit about composition in an earlier video. And basically, my feeling on the rules of composition is they are purely empirical, and they come about as a result of, if you look at 1,000 pictures and you look at the ones you like, they will have particular features, whether they are picking up a subject at the intersection of the rule of thirds, whether they conform to golden secant, whether they have lead-in lines, whether they're balanced, all of those things you will tend to pick out, but they won't all apply to every image. And if you follow specific advice from a limited number of people, then what will happen is you will tend to adopt an approach that is similar to theirs, and it will straitjacket you into a particular approach. Now, there are people on YouTube who move away from that, and particularly Alistair Bennett at the moment is talking about a much deeper appreciation of composition and relating composition to how you feel and how you see the landscape around you. And I think that is probably something that is worth considering in addition to looking at these simple steps forward. Now, to come back to sources of information, reliability of information, as I say, a lot of these videos, although they have these misleading titles that are designed to drive traffic to a site, as I said before, the information isn't necessarily wrong. Some of it may be, some of it won't be. How do you tell the difference? Now, I said I was involved in training, I was involved in higher education. And the thing that you'll find with most higher education courses is that there will be a big effort made to train students to be critical of the sources of information that they use. Now, criticism has a bad rap in terms of photography, particularly in YouTube. If you criticize something, you're a troll. Well, obviously trolls exist. They make unfounded criticisms. But the implication is that criticism is always negative. In an academic sense, that isn't right. If you're talking about providing a critique of something, you're talking about identifying its strengths and weaknesses. So if you're an academic and you're asked to review a funding proposal or review a draft application, your job is to go through that and to look at the strong points and the weak points and to come to a judgment as to whether a funding application should be funded, whether a draft publication should be published. And that's not necessarily to say it should be funded without some alterations or some revisions, or similarly should be published without revisions. But critique is a positive exercise. It's not about being purely negative. It's not about running somebody down. It is about establishing the worth of something. So when it comes to information in an academic sense, there is a hierarchy of reliability. And the gold standard is what is known as peer review, particularly peer-reviewed articles in internationally read journals. And the way that works is manuscripts are submitted, they are sent out by an editor to a number of other people with expertise in the field, and typically 4 or 5, to assess that, to do a criticism, a critique, positives and negatives, and to make a recommendation. Should this work be published? Should it be published without revision? Should it be revised? Or is it of so little value or so fundamentally wrong it shouldn't be published? And that means that if you look at something in a peer-reviewed journal, you can have some confidence in its reliability. Similarly for textbooks, publishers of textbooks usually send out draft chapters to similarly referees to critique to decide whether the work is worthwhile. Once work is published, it's sent out for review. And again, it will be reviewed by people with expertise, and those reviews will again inform you as to whether the information is reliable, useful, or in the worst case, fundamentally wrong. None of that exists with YouTube. YouTube is completely not peer-reviewed. Slightly exaggerated statement, because obviously people comment on YouTube. But the people who comment are very often the people who are looking to benefit from the information, and they may be at a level where they don't have enough background to be able to assess the reliability of that information. Also, on YouTube, it is possible to censor the comments. And I've seen people who put out information on YouTube at a video, and they get somebody makes a criticism, and from my perspective, an entirely valid criticism, and the person putting out the video starts bleating that they're being trolled. Well, yeah, trolling happens, as I said, but it's very easy to censure valid criticisms under the headline that they're trolling. So what can you do? Well, the other thing you can do, if you have information from sources where you can't be totally confident of the reliability, is to look for validation from other sources. So if a video gives you 5 steps to improving your ability to use your camera, and there is another video from somebody else covering a similar topic, do they agree? It's not foolproof by any means, particularly if one person has been doing it for 20 years and one person has been doing it for 2 or 3 years, because the less experienced person might just simply have copied the views of a more experienced person and passed them off as their own. But generally speaking, if you look at a number of sources, you can start to see where things are generally agreed and where there are discrepancies in opinion. But the other thing is, don't rely just on YouTube. Videos can be very good for an introduction to a subject and to give you an overview and a scope. Tony Northrup's argument is you can't learn anything from YouTube because it doesn't have a structured syllabus, and it doesn't take you through holding your hand, giving you exposure, giving you worked examples to plough through and to assess what you achieve. Now, that's not the only way to train people, and particularly in a subject as diverse as photography, where you may want to pick up a particular skill, not necessarily assess the whole of the area. So what I would suggest you do is find reliable non-video material on the web, and to use that where you need to look into more detail to understand the significance of what you're being told. And there are sites on the internet where there may not be rigorous peer review, but the sites have been going for long enough and have a wider range of contributors that you can be reasonably sure that there is some attempt at editorial control. And then sorts of sites that you might want to look at for that are Cambridge in Colour, which gives a lot of background information, particularly on technical aspects of photography. So if you're looking at a video and maybe you don't understand something, or you're not sure that the information is correct, then that is a good resource. It also, like most reliable sources of information, will quote further reading. Hesitate to mention Wikipedia, but Wikipedia is also a source of information, and there is attempts to validate the information on Wikipedia. Then you come down to specific authors who have been going for a long time, and one that I would suggest that is worth looking at, although he has perhaps a Nikon slant, is Thom Hogan. There is a lot of technical information on Thom Hogan's site, and Thom is a rigorous author. So again, if you're not sure of information, that's a good site to go to. Another site to look at is Photography Life. That's a site that's been going for quite a few years now, and has a number of guest authors. And particularly if you're looking at technical information and you're prepared to risk a headache, anything written by Ilya Borg will give you a very detailed insight into the underpinning theory. Maybe far more than you need, but if you get to issues that can be a little contentious that I've mentioned previously, like the exposed to the right technique, where a number of YouTubers have been critical of that, if you read Ilya Borg's articles on exposed to the right, you will understand the theory and why it is suggested, or why it is a good approach to use in many situations. So I'm going to wind it up there. I hopefully have just given you pause to cause to pause and think about the reliability of the information you're getting to YouTube, to treat these suggestions that there is a quick and instant route to a quick fix for perfect photos with a degree of caution, and to attempt to validate the reliability of the information you're getting, because it may well save you a lot of effort and possibly a lot of disappointment. So I hope you found this interesting, and once again, thanks for watching. Goodbye.